and welcome to this edition of Epicenter. No ambiguity, no noise. Let's come straight to the point. Season 2 of Epicenter began last week, and I have received numerous messages from all of you about the topics that you would like to be discussed threadbare here. One of the topics that all of us sent messages on was the topic that has been on headlines in Indian newspapers as well, is Pakistan and its current crisis. What is really happening in Pakistan? Currently, their economy is in a state of free fall. Foreign exchange reserves are depleting fast. They dropped to, if I remember correctly, because it's changing every day, I think on January 20th, they had dropped to meager $3.68 billion. Pakistani cities reeled under a nationwide power outage, paralyzing their daily life and shutting down their already down economy. Although Pakistan has enough installed power generation capacity, it lacks resources to run its power plants, as the sector is in deep debt. Some of you might remember the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Because of that, they did fix or build some of Pakistan's infrastructure, but the country is so deep into debt that they cannot even operate that infrastructure and benefit from it. On the internal security front, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, which pulled out of the ceasefire with the government late last year, has escalated attacks on the civilians and security forces. The situation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan is dire. Meanwhile, relations with the Taliban regime continue to fray. Afghanistan's new rulers, who were once proteges of Pakistan's ISI, are refusing to toe Pakistan's line and show no inclination to rein in Pakistani Taliban or oust them from Afghanistan. So where is Pakistan really headed? To talk about all this, I couldn't have asked for a better guest today. I have with me on Epicenter, Sushant Sareen. Sushant Sareen is a senior fellow at Observer Research Foundation. His published works include Balochistan, Forgotten War, Forsaken People, which was published in 2017, Corridor Calculus, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and China's Comprador Model of Investment in Pakistan, which was published in 2016, and Zarb-e-Azab, an evaluation of Pakistan's army's anti-Taliban operation in North Waziristan. He writes columns for a number of Indian newspapers and news portals. I regularly read them. Sushant is also a regular feature on various TV and radio networks. You must have heard him. There, I constantly make it a point to read Sushant, especially on Pakistan and India-Pakistan relationships. Welcome to the show, Sushant.
Thanks for having me, Sunanda. Thanks.
Thank you. Sushant, I just want to take you back to August 2021. That is when, if you remember, United States withdrew from Pakistan. The commotion around the commentariat, if you remember, because we do a lot of lazy analysis, was that Pakistan has won the war. First, they defeated USSR. Now they defeated USA. So they've defeated two superpowers. If you remember, that was the conversation. I remember one iconic photograph, I'm sure you remember it, when ISI Chief, Director General, Lieutenant General Faz Hamid, the ISI, he arrived in Kabul. I think it was right after United States had withdrawn. Last of their forces had withdrawn. And there was a picture of him drinking tea. And he was just, I think the ambassador to Afghanistan, Mansoor Ahmad Khan, was with him in a hotel in Kabul. And the picture showed him with drinking a cup of tea. And he was in, like an emperor visiting his spoils. And that's when everyone was said that, listen, America has, Pakistan has defeated two superpowers. At that time, I remember a reporter from, I think it was Channel 4. They asked them, a reporter from Reporter asked General Faz that, what are you going to do in Afghanistan now? Something, I paraphrase it. And I remember he said, there will be peace and stability in Afghanistan. Don't worry, everything will be okay. A year later, Afghanistan is what Afghanistan is, but there is no peace and stability in Pakistan. And Faz Ahmad is gone. We have a new ISI chief. What really happened? What was that, what did the withdrawal of United States that everyone said will go in Pakistan's favor, what changed there?
Sunanda, it was never going to go in Pakistan's favor. People who knew the dynamics of what was underway in Afghanistan, and I'm not talking about people from anywhere else. I think the Americans and the Europeans and the British, of course, always play an evil game.
Yeah.
But most of these guys were somewhat clueless.
Hmm.
But there were Pakistani analysts who were warning of precisely what is happening right now. Of course, any good advice in Pakistan goes down the drain, and so did this. And I believe I think a couple of weeks back, a top police officer wrote an article that we should have understood that how things are, what things what the DNA of the TTP and the Afghan Taliban is. Uh, but you still have that twat of a foreign minister of theirs, who says that no, Afghan Taliban are different from Pakistani Taliban. So, that I think it's deliberate confusion, or if you will, denial. But uh, look, I always had a fight to pick with people who were saying that Pakistan is now victorious. Pakistan has won this massive victory, and stuff like that. And there was that despondency which people who know nothing about these wars was talking about.
A lot of it is Twitter analysis, lazy analysis. You have to say something
Exactly.
right there.
Exactly. And
Hmm.
Sunanda, not to blow my trumpet, but I've always maintained, and for many, many years, that there is never any end game in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. What people call an end game is the beginning of a new game, right? So it just carries on and on and on. And this is one lesson which, of course, our people forgot. Um, and the lesson which the Pakistanis forgot was that you can, and this is, again, this is received knowledge, that you can rent a Afghan, you can't buy him.
Hmm.
And they thought that they'd bought them for life. uh, but the lease had run out, and the Afghans or the Taliban had actually, to use Imran Khan's words, shaken off the shackles of slavery.
Yeah.
The only thing was that the Taliban shook off the shackles of slavery of Pakistan.
Yeah.
They are no longer slaves of Pakistan. So what the way things have worked out, the Pakistanis manufactured a fake narrative that the Afghan government, the previous Afghan government, was actually responsible for terrorism inside Pakistan, for backing the TTP,
Yeah.
which is utter nonsense, because as we know that almost 4 to 5 thousand TTP guys who had been arrested and imprisoned by the old government were released by the Taliban.
Yeah.
We know it for a fact that the Pakistani Taliban, were born from the womb of the Afghan Taliban.
Hmm.
Uh, the Pakistani Taliban emerged as soon as the Afghan Taliban in 1996 had entered Kabul. Because I remember in those days, there were these tiny snippets which would appear in Pakistani press,
Yeah.
that in some obscure corner of that Fata region, the tribal belt, some 5, 7, 10 guys had suddenly got together and announced that we are the local Taliban.
Hmm.
They had emboldened these people, they had enthused these guys, and that was the beginning of the Pakistani Taliban movement.
Hmm.
It later on became the TTP and all of that, but the roots of that movement go back to 1996.
Yeah.
And of course many things happened in between. The Pakistani Taliban leadership was part and parcel of the first Afghan regime. They were either secretaries, drivers, bodyguards, in the troops of the Afghan Taliban, and all these guys had come back into Pakistan, and then they gave support and sanctuary to the Afghan Taliban.
Hmm.
So for anybody to think that these links would be severed simply because the Taliban had come back into power, that was not going to happen. The second thing, which everybody forgot, was, and this is the bullshit which, many of your American academics, and I sometimes wonder why anybody goes to America to study at least social sciences. Uh, the toughest level.
Nobody in America should study at least Indian subcontinent because they cannot do it. They just cannot.
No, they shouldn't be studying anything. Look at the hash they made of their own society, with this wokeness which they promoted,
Yeah,
and destroying city after city, and the entire American story by these absolutely wacko wokes.
yeah,
Uh, but the thing is that these American academics were writing about Taliban 2.0, the new Taliban, how the Taliban movement is, at its very basic thing, it's an Afghan nationalist movement. This was the snake oil which was being sold to everybody.
mm,
And everybody forgot that at the very base of the Taliban was an ideological movement.
yeah,
It was an out and out Islamist movement. Yes, it was the Afghan manifestation of a phenomena which we see from Morocco to the Philippines,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Uh, but it was out and out an Islamic movement with links with other Islamist movements.
Right.
And this was a lesson which everybody forgot.
Yeah.
And it was
Most
as
people
clear as
don't
day.
understand that there is a global jihad network. Most people don't
Exactly,
understand. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And for example, uh, the Afghans or the Pashtuns in particular were never known for suicide bombing. It wasn't part of the culture. Their culture was, yes, they would fight hard, and then they would always keep an escape route for themselves to live to fight another day. But this business of strapping a bomb on yourself and blowing yourself up came actually uh, from
Palestine.
West Asia.
Palestine. Oh, didn't it come from Palestine? I thought it came from Palestine
No,
first.
not necessarily Palestine, but that entire region.
Right.
The Iraq War, for
Hmm.
example. All of this,
Hmm.
and there was so much of toing and froing because, again, I'm not saying anything. I'm not revealing any absolutely new fact. But for example, Zarqawi, who
Hmm.
is in a sense the father of ISIS, in a
Hmm.
manner of speaking,
Hmm.
was actually part and parcel of the Afghan jihad,
Hmm.
and then went from Afghanistan back to Iraq,
Yeah.
right, where he
Right.
set this thing up,
Hmm.
in Iraq, and then from that the ISIS actually emerged. It was the Al Qaeda, but then he formed another organization, and then the ISIS was actually born.
The
Uh,
alphabet soup can be anything, but they're all part of global jihad network, which we
Exactly,
now know.
exactly. So
Yeah.
at its very basic, their ideology, there is an ideological continuum between all these organizations, and
Yeah.
this had been forgotten.
Yeah.
So for people to imagine that the Afghan Taliban, having gotten hold of Afghanistan, got back into power, would just rest, with that place, and would not export their quote unquote revolution, uh, you had to be living in cloud cuckoo land to think that that would happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because these guys were very driven, they were very ideologically motivated. So what is happening has come as absolutely no surprise at all.
Yeah. So we will talk about this ideological business and the idea of Pakistan and all that in the beginning. But I want to ask you first another question. We will talk about the economy and we'll talk about the ideological thing because those are very important things when we talk about Pakistan. But I want to ask you, and this is what has foxed me too. Imran Khan, as we all know, was chosen by Fauj. He wouldn't have been the prime minister if he was not chosen by Fauj at that time. And in spite of his all democratically elected nonsense and all that he keeps saying, but after that he fell out with Forge, and now we see him going out. I haven't seen any political leader going against GHQ the way he has gone. I want you to sort of analyze Imran Khan's tenure a bit, because this is right when this whole Afghanistan thing also happened, and it also seems from outside after this Imran, who is highly popular in Pakistan, whether we like it or not, and is driving these street protests. Has army really weakened?
I think the army has weakened. Mm, because the way the army was able to assert itself in the past, it is simply not able to assert itself anymore. Uh, it does not mean that it's completely powerless. That also might happen going forward, but very clearly, the nuisance or the menace of the army was that once the generals glared at you, you started sitting up and down as per their wishes. That's not happening in the same way. The other reason why the army is not completely powerless is because if one guy goes against the army, there are a whole lot of others who are ready to suck up to the army. So right now, the Shabazz Sharif and the rest, Bilawal Bhutto and all these guys are wanting to get onto the right side of the army, thinking that will catapult them back or at least keep them in power. Imran also would not mind, and would be quite open to dealing with the army. But it's something like what happened with Nawaz Sharif. Nawaz Sharif, see, every person that the army has picked up has eventually gone against the army, starting from Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, right? He
Hmm.
went against his benefactors.
Yeah.
Nawaz Sharif went against his benefactors.
Hmm.
Uh, apna Imran Khan has gone against his benefactors, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that is the nature of the beast. Now, with Imran, of course, they should have understood that this guy was utterly vacuous, but he was also very vindictive and vicious. But most importantly, he was a megalomaniac, and he actually thought that he is so powerful uh, that nobody can actually that he can afford to defy everybody. Now the generals continued to mollycoddle him. They continued to try and talk some good sense into him, but Imran was not willing to listen to anything which he thought could affect his political interests. So that led to the falling out with the army. uh, Again, the feckless administration meant that things had started, the drift in the affairs of state had become something which the army could no longer ignore. So they had to pull back their support from him. And then the government fell like a house of cards. The surprising thing, and I must admit that even I was a little surprised, in part because the army was not able to act against him.
Yeah.
The surprising thing was how quickly Imran Khan bounced back.
Hmm.
Uh, and why I find that surprising is that, and why I think that the army has weakened, is because we know now for a fact there is enough stuff which is there in the public domain, uh, that the army was divided, split right down the middle. At one level were the generals. Now, this is something Imran himself used to say, that the generals are against me, but the rank and file is with me. The generals are against me, but their families support me,
Hmm.
right? So this he had actually done something which was the biggest red line in the army,
Yeah.
that you don't play politics within the army.
Army.
He had done that, and he had done it quite successfully, to give the devil his due.
Hmm.
Uh, and what he had done was, so for example, ex-servicemen became the voice of people within the army who were actually not on the same page as the top brass
Hmm.
on how to handle Imran. So very clearly those divisions are there, and there was a real fear that if they were to put a hand on Imran after he had been ousted, it could lead to some reaction within the army, something which the generals did not want, could not afford. The second thing which Imran did, which was also something which has damaged the army, is that there's always been a lot of uh, what is the exact word? I wouldn't say hatred, but a dislike or suspicion or whatever you want to call it of the army in Sindh, in Balochistan, in KP, right?
Everywhere outside of Punjab.
Everywhere outside of Punjab.
Hmm.
This was the first time when you saw an upsurge of anti-army sentiment in Punjab. Again, very importantly, this sentiment was not coming from the dispossessed and the wretched of the earth. This sentiment was coming from the rich and the powerful, the middle class, families of Fauji's, ex-Fauji's, judges, their families, lawyers, professionals, businessmen, the elite sections, the the vocal, the voluble, the visible sections of society, the perfumed people, if you will,
Yeah.
the burger crowd, right?
Mm.
Uh, Now it's one thing to pick up people who are nameless, faceless, without connections, and throw them in some dungeon somewhere, like you do to the Baloch, or you do to the Sindhis, or even the Pashtuns. Uh, Quite another to do something similar to somebody in Punjab who is very well connected, comes from a rich, well-to-do family, because then the family connections, the biradari connections take over.
Also, the way Pakistani, which I found very strange when I found out, is whoever wins Punjab wins Pakistan.
No, no, but that's also mathematics, right?
Yeah.
Because Punjab, the number of seats which Punjab has is a simple majority in the National Assembly.
What I was saying is that if there is a popular uprising against Fauj in Punjab, then they really need to be worried.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so these were the two factors
Yeah.
why the Pakistan army has simply not been able to act against Imran Khan, and they're still reluctant.
Yeah.
So I think Imran has damaged the Pakistan army and its image, because the kind of social, again, the irony is that the army and the troll core of the army and the troll gangs of Imran Khan were one and the same, right? Uh, and then the irony is that they had been actually funded, supported, in fact, even trained, many of them, by the ISPR. And then these same guys turned on the ISPR and went hammer and tongs at the army. The kind of trends they made. Bajwa traitor is still a trend, you
Yeah.
know. So, so the thing is that when you start looking at what they've done to the Pakistan army, the way they've damaged it, the way they have insulted it, the way they have lampooned it, whether it's on Twitter Spaces, Facebook, Instagram, you name it,
Yeah.
Pakistan Army's name is mud today.
Yeah.
So,
Which is I never thought it would happen. Because
no,
the only
that is
institution
why
that was standing in Pakistan was army. That's the only institution that ever mattered.
so, Sunanda, for example, I have always been a great fan of and supporter of Imran Khan. I think he was the best thing that happened to India in Pakistan. I can't think of anything better than him. And if he comes back, I swear I'll throw a party in my house, because जो भी रही सही कसर है ना, he's going to
उसने
make
पूरी कर
sure
दी
that he finishes it off.
उसने
And in fact, I had said this to a very senior Pakistani official, and I'm talking about way back in 2014 or 2015. He had come and he was talking about, how Imran Khan is seen as this great hope, knight in shining armor by people in the army and people in the military and civil establishment. And I had told him at that point of time, I said, I really wish this guy on you,
yeah,
because from
true.
whatever I have made out of him, ये आपकी ईंट से ईंट बजा देगा.
True.
And he
So
has done it.
रियासत मदीना तो वो बना नहीं पाया, but what he did, and he was not never able to going to do it because there is nothing like रियासत मदीना or anything. But what he was at was just a utopia. But what he really did was he brought Pakistan Army's name, the only last institution standing in Pakistan, because everything else was already finished. He brought it
Crumbling.
into mud. So that will be a lasting contribution of Imran Khan, and as you say, everywhere else, because people everywhere else had been trying to, Pakistan Army में sand लगाना, वो नहीं हो पाया था. He was able to do it.
Sunanda, see, he destroyed, the army as an institution. He has sold divisions in the army.
Yeah.
Uh, he destroyed Pakistan's relations with other countries, with the West, for example, except the British, but the British don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
But he destroyed Pakistan's relations with the Arabs, for example,
Yeah.
and with the Chinese to some extent.
Yeah.
Okay. He ruined Pakistan's economy. He destroyed Pakistan. Whatever, you know, what you might call Rawadari. I don't know how. The basic modicum of behavior
mm,
in politics. He destroyed that. He polarized politics to a point where he has injected so much poison in Pakistani politics that it's going to be extremely difficult to get out of. So everything he has touched, he has destroyed.
yeah.
He even destroyed Pakistani cricket in his time.
Yes.
So, so yeah, he's a
Well,
genius.
the man we really wish him. I hope he comes to power again.
Yeah.
So here is my question. In the West, we in India, of course, knew we had blown their bluff right there in 1971. That this whole idea, because I call Pakistan the original Islamist state, because that was the only reason it came into power. And we, of course, this whole thing was known in 1971 when Bangladesh was created. But Pak West, especially America, after 1971 also, kept supporting Pakistan. And that was the only reason was their geography. As we all say, that they leveraged their geography. They kept saying Cold War and all that, that, here we are, a leverage against India for you and a leverage against, so all that was there. We know the history of Cold War. My sense is, and I have spoken to a lot of people on the Hill and American politicians. By the way, one thing that that Pakistan used to get right, and Indians never got it right, was the lobbying on in Congress. That lobbying they used to get right, because India always believed in outright diplomacy. They didn't believe in this lobbying business. But Pakistan, of course, all the money that they were getting, they were using it in lobbying. But even after that, my sense was all these congressmen and all these senators who were sitting on the Pakistan caucus in, in Senate, or who were in the House, they all knew Pakistan's reality. If you spoke to them off camera, they knew that it was a hub of terrorism. They knew what was going on, and they knew they were breeding terrorism. They knew they were using cross-border terrorism against Pakistan. So it's not that they did not know. I am a witness to this. Off camera, they would tell you all this. Yet they were sending money to Pakistan just because you could not get it out of their minds that this whole strategy thing is a blackmail that Pakistan is using on it. Yeah, strategic importance hai. There was no strategic location thing ever. Pakistan used it for the longest time. Then, of course, when United States moves out of this region and their entire focus is on China now, as we know, they're not interested in this region at all. Pakistan thought that they were going to be the rulers of this whole region. It didn't turn out the whole that. Arab countries, India in the process has been making a lot of headways with Arab countries, with a lot of diplomacy going on there. So, United West now is reluctant to fund Pakistan. Arab world is reluctant to keep them on their head and keep funding them. They might not say it, but they might. What does Pakistan bring to the table? Still, is there anything that Pakistan brings to the table for
Nuisance
anybody?
value.
Nuisance.
Nuisance value.
Yeah.
Just nothing more. Look,
They keep talking about this nuclear. We are the only Muslim nuclear power and all that stuff.
so let me try and make some sense of how the Americans dealt with Pakistan.
Hmm. Hmm.
See, one was that they had an old alliance with the Pakistanis during the Cold War, and even later they, over a period of time, you build associations, you build friendships, you build contacts. You know how to, wine and dine those guys, and all of that helps, right?
Hmm.
Within the Pentagon, within the CIA, and the State Department, there was a lot of support, at least sympathy
Hmm.
for Pakistan. But most importantly, even though many people would have known that what the Pakistanis were up to, there were certain compulsions, if you will. So, for example, once a country decides as a state that it has a certain strategic imperative, then willy nilly everybody falls in line, even if they don't like somebody.
Hmm.
At least that's what serious countries do. Now, uh, you know, uh, look at the relationship of the US in the 70s, for example. from around 72, 73, with Bhutto and his socialism and stuff like that. Uh, you know, a wedge had already come in. Uh, Very often people forget that in 79, a Pakistani mob burned down the American embassy.
Yeah.
And had the Soviets not entered Afghanistan, Pakistan would have remained in the doghouse.
Mm.
So when the Soviets entered Afghanistan, Pakistan became relevant. It remained relevant till 1989, 1990, and then it lost its relevance because the Americans had got what they wanted and they were ready to move out. And for the Pakistanis to complain that the Americans left us holding the can, that was a can that the Pakistanis wanted to hold on to because they realized that the shit which is there in that can is something they can throw at India also, and something which they can use in Afghanistan, something which they can use in Iran, something which they can use in other parts of the world. Because very often people forget that when Pakistan is called the epicenter of terrorism, Pakistani fingerprints and Pakistani footprints were found again from Morocco to the Philippines, right? People
Yeah.
forget this.
Yeah.
Uh, every terror incident which happened in the 90s and even in the 2000s had a Pakistani footprint or a Pakistani fingerprint
Yeah.
because the Pakistanis were using it. Their own former ISI chief, Javed Nasir, uh, has said in a court affidavit that when the war in Bosnia was happening, and there was a arms embargo, an international arms embargo imposed by the United Nations, the Pakistanis were smuggling weapons out there to help the jihadists,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So they they were found in Somalia, they were found in Sudan, they were found all over the damn place, right? So the Pakistanis actually embraced jihadism as an instrument of foreign policy. So you can't blame the Americans for that. But uh, throughout the 90s, the relationship remained somewhat strained. The Americans would put some sanctions, then withdraw them. But, the relationship was continuing. Then comes, 9/11. And again, Pakistan becomes relevant for the next 20 years. But the world has changed.
Yeah.
The Cold War is over. There is a new Cold War looming. The strategic challenge is now not so much, at least from the American viewpoint, not so much of terrorism as it is of China and Russia. So, there is no relevance as far as the Pakistanis are concerned in terms of their geography. Secondly, in terms of geoeconomics, what does their geography bring? Now, they say that geoeconomics, we are very relevant
Mm.
because we connect South Asia to Central Asia and West Asia. How? South Asia is India.
Yeah.
You severed all connections with India. And frankly, it's good that you've done it because I don't think we should have any truck with these guys.
Mm.
But you're a bridge, yes, but a bridge which is hanging in mid-air because you have nowhere to land. So the relevance of trade and transit corridors is now only in the context of India.
Mm.
If you can be a bridge to India, you are relevant. Otherwise, you are irrelevant
Yeah.
in the context of geoeconomics. Then you, rather than benefit from 9/11 by stabilizing Afghanistan, making it a nice, decent, moderate, modern place, you once again impose these medieval barbarians on them. As a result, Afghanistan has blown up now. So if the idea was to connect to Central Asia, that was only going to happen through Afghanistan.
Mm.
That's gone out of the window.
Yeah.
The same thing happened, Sunanda, in the 90s. When Soviet Union broke up, Central Asia became independent. The Pakistani wet dream was that we will now become the center of this part of the world because all Central Asian trade and transit will go through us. But
Again,
even then,
leveraging their geography. They only want to leverage their geography.
yeah, but even then, the curse of geography they have is that they have Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And then everything goes for a six. So I think in terms of geoeconomics, they've lost relevance.
Yeah.
In terms of their own economics,
Mm.
they've completely lost relevance. Look, the Arabs are nobody's fools, right?
Yeah.
And I think one credit, among other things also, which one can give them credit for, but one credit, for example, on the foreign policy front is or which must be given to Mr. Modi,
Yeah.
is his outreach to the
Arab
Arab
world.
world.
Yeah.
You know, before that, I think he was the first Indian prime minister in, I don't know, 20 or 30 years to go to Saudi Arabia and to the UAE. Well,
Mm.
they're such a important pivotal players,
And
and
they're
we
right
don't.
there. The geographically also they are so important.
They're very important geographically, but even more importantly, Sunanda, you have a large diaspora living out there.
Yes.
They are a huge market for you. They are important for you from the point of view of energy security. They are strategically important. You get remittances from there.
Yeah.
How can you ignore a region like that and give the Pakistanis a walkover out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the moment Modi starts going out there and he starts engaging with these guys, the world changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now just make a comparison. The Saudis are saying we want to invest $75 billion in India, and they give $3 billion in bheek to Pakistan as loan. The Emiratis are saying $100 billion investment in virtually every field,
Mm.
right? And they say, okay, fine, we gave you 2 billion last time you came. Okay, fine. If you are begging me so much, which was admitted by Shabashi, okay, take another billion and just get the hell out of here.
Get it
And they
out.
still have not given that billion.
Yeah. And they're
Okay.
giving it them at a very high interest rate also.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and they are saying that, okay, now, the Qataris are saying, okay, fine, you sell us all those plants which you have made,
Yeah.
which are captive, which will run on LNG. So the Qataris will send their own LNG,
Yeah. Yeah. So they
transport it
are
out there
driving
and
the
charge
offer.
them
They're
top
not.
dollar for
They're
it.
not. They're not giving them walkover because Islam.
Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing, right? So, this Islam ka jhanda, Pakistan was only selling its geography and Islam,
Yeah.
as though, the Arabs have learned Islam from Pakistanis. It's strange. And somebody said many, many years ago that to listen to the Pakistanis, you would think that Islam was revealed only on August 14, 1947. So, there are strange people, absolutely crazy,
Yeah.
obnoxious, and utterly poisonous. So,
Let me ask you a
frankly,
question on this. On this, let me ask you a follow-up question. Do you think Arab world, of course, cares about Islam? These are all Islamic countries. They care about Islam, but they do not care about so-called constructed, manufactured Muslim issues in India and Pakistan. Would you say that's correct?
look, yeah, I would say that partly it is correct. I think from the Arab point of view, they understand that India is a very complex country.
Mm,
They understand there will be tensions in India.
mm,
They would want that India, they don't want to interfere in your affairs,
yeah,
but they would want that, yeah, manage it yourself and
yeah.
manage it in a way that, that we are not asked any
For
questions.
example, they don't care what happens in Kashmir.
Otherwise, you manage it. No, you
Yeah.
just manage it yourselves,
Mm,
right? Uh, the other thing is that from the Arab point of view, which a colleague of mine, informed me, or in fact, I should say, educated me. He said, from the Arab point of view, there is this factor that they have, people, say, for example, from Pakistan and other places also out there. So if something happens in India, then it could become
mm,
a bit of a law and order problem inside, their country. So they would want to avoid that, which is
yeah,
understandable, right? But even then, you will never see the Arabs come out openly, like the West does,
mm,
hectoring you, sermonizing. Even if they want to have a conversation with you, the Arabs are very sophisticated in terms of their diplomacy.
mm,
They will come, they will talk to you on the quiet. They'll try and sort things out,
mm,
not make too much of a hullabaloo about it.
mm,
And I think that works well for us. And I
yeah.
think we both sides understand each other's imperatives. And so the relationship has changed. Sunanda, I was just hearing a Pakistani journalist
Mm.
yesterday, and he was, for example, saying that the Arabs, for example, have told the Pakistanis very clearly, get off your Kashmir hobby horse.
Yeah.
It's not it should not be on the table anymore.
Mm.
Get over it. Make up with India, because that is the way you have to go.
Mm.
Don't expect any help from us on this particular issue. We have tried to help you enough in the past, not anymore. Our own interests now impinge on this, and so do yours. So please, get real, and get off this hobby horse of yours. And
So, if
I
the
think,
West will not support Pakistan on Kashmir, if the Arab countries will not support Pakistan on Kashmir, then what is Pakistan's position on Kashmir anyway? What did they do after August 5th, after the abrogation of Article 370? I think Imran Khan did some stand for Pakistan or stand for Kashmir, something. वो एक Sunday चला, उसके बाद फिर सारा खत्म हो गया. It fizzled out.
it fizzled out. It
It
fizzled out.
fizzled out. So nobody
Yeah,
was standing for Kashmir or sitting for Kashmir anymore. So
yeah,
even
he
within
he renamed
Pakistan,
a road also. He renamed a road from, I think, Kashmir Highway to Srinagar Highway or something like
हाँ
that.
तो मतलब पर कुछ solid तो कर ही नहीं पाए. They haven't been able to do anything because right after abrogation of Article 370, if you remember, amongst the many diplomatic successes of Narendra Modi government, I consider this a very important because remember the map was changed.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it was a map that was
Hmm.
completely changed. And Foreign Minister Jaishankar, he flew to China. If you remember, he flew to China right after that, and I'm sure we are not privy to what happened, but samajh mein aa jata hai. He probably told them that, listen, this is our internal reorganization. We're not doing anything. We're not changing anything. You guys need to calm down. And pretty much China did not support Pakistan on
Yeah,
this.
they made a bit of a song and dance. The Chinese position hasn't really changed
Ah,
over the years
ah.
on the Kashmir thing. Their position has always been the same, that the
Aapat mein
UN
solve
and
karo.
bilateral documents, etc.,
Mm,
etc., which is
yeah,
neither here nor there.
yeah.
So, which is okay. Look, uh, I I am very clear, Sunanda, that we have to manage the Kashmir issue on our own. We
Mm,
need to settle it on our own,
mm.
because as far as the rest of the world is concerned, some of those guys would be happy to see it, go out of the window. Many others would like it to remain on the table, to be used as a leverage somewhere along the line. So I think we need to understand how international politics
But
works.
it's also
Nobody has.
important if you notice that China plays its game very clearly because they might have done whatever they did in UN or even after, I think, but they don't raise it bilaterally ever. And Arab
No.
countries don't raise it bilaterally ever because foreign ministers of India and China have met after that. And foreign minister of India keeps meeting Arab leaders. They haven't raised it on bilateral forums. To me, that is a more legitimate forum than UN because UN we all know what it is at the moment.
No,
Doesn't
but
doesn't
it's not only with us. I
yeah.
think even with the Pakistanis, if you ever read any joint statement
Mm,
which comes out of, but on any of the bilaterals, especially with
mm,
the Arab world,
yeah.
the line will be that the prime minister informed whoever, so and so, of what was happening in Kashmir.
Yeah.
And the Pakistanis keep jumping up and up and down with
Pakistan,
joy.
Kashmir,
"Hey,
cake.
Kashmir ka naam aa gaya." They're such bloody losers, yeah. The point nobody asks is, okay, so our prime minister apprised the other guy of this. What did that guy say? That is never there in any
Yeah,
of these statements.
yeah,
And yet
absolutely.
these jokers keep jumping up and down with joy. Oh, Kashmir has been mentioned. We have raised the Kashmir issue. Eh, Bunch of clowns, yeah.
Okay. So we have last 15 minutes of this conversation left, and there are some questions. We have a lot of young people who watch this show, Sushant, and they have these questions. So I'm going to raise anybody who has questions. Please keep. I'm getting many questions. Please send questions as we are talking. I have two more questions to ask Sushant. One, India has now finally, thank the Lords, raised the water treaty, Indus water treaty issue. First, if you could briefly make our audience understand what is this treaty and why was Pakistan leveraging that also because India had given up its position of strength on it. So, give us a little sense of what is happening there, and is India serious about now renegotiating Indus Water Treaty?
So very briefly, one, I think the Indus Waters Treaty was unfairly pilloried in the past. That our rivers were signed off and all.
Mm,
They were as much Pakistan's rivers as they were ours,
mm,
and in fact, there was a much larger area uh, which they serviced in Pakistan than they did in India. Uh, so I think it was a fair treaty or a relatively fair treaty. The problem has come over the years because even what is allowed to us under the treaty, the Pakistanis continuously object to it. They not only object to it, but they use the letter of the treaty to try and obstruct each and every project, even though uh, there are new techniques and technologies which have come, which need to be used, but which were not catered for in the treaty, but which need to be used to increase the efficiency and the longevity of the project.
mm,
Now, over the years, the Indians have indulged them. We have engaged with them. Every time they've created a dispute, we've gone about it and, stuff like that. But the position has been hardening over the last few years,
mm,
maybe a decade or more also. And the position has been hardening to a point where, within the government, a lot of people have said that, look, I think we should scrap the Indus Waters Treaty.
mm,
The government so far has not done it and has been very scrupulous about it. And even when it says that it will not, allow Pakistan to, or not allow any water to flow into Pakistan, it's basically talking about not allowing any part which has been allotted to India to flow into Pakistan.
mm,
But I think this time around, when they say that we are now going to look for a modification to the treaty, it I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I think it is a warning shot which has been fired that uh, if you don't behave, if you continue to obstruct, then we will even walk out of this treaty.
ah,
Now, the treaty does not allow for it,
mm,
and because the World Bank is part of the treaty, walking out of it is not going to be very easy. In any case, even if you walk out of it, Sunanda, until and unless you have built the infrastructure to use the waters,
mm.
it is pointless saying that I've scrapped the treaty.
फिर तो this is just
The water
grandstanding.
will continue to flow the way the water is flowing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there is nothing you can do about it. So
Mm,
even if you want to build a dam, it'll take you 5 years, 7 years, 10 years to
mm,
build a
mm,
big dam out there. In
mm,
any case, in many of those areas, because of the kind of ecology of that area, you probably will not build a large storage dam. You
mm,
probably build a run of the river project. You might build some canal systems to irrigate lands in Jammu and Kashmir.
mm,
Maybe even try and bring some of those waters to Punjab and other places. But again, that you're looking at a 20-year horizon.
mhm,
But I think that warning shot has been fired nevertheless. Now, the Pakistanis, of course, think that India can't unilaterally walk out of the treaty. But I have just written for ORF just today.
mhm,
And my argument is that, yes, under the treaty, you can't walk out of, but no treaty, lasts in perpetuity.
yeah,
And once the objective conditions uh, are of a type that somebody can walk out of a treaty, somebody does walk out of a treaty.
mhm,
It's more about power politics and power dynamics than it is about international law. So if the Pakistanis do not engage with India seriously and continue to do chest thumping and you know uh, show that they are very show their machismo, then I think there will be a very rude shock coming to them, quite similar to the what happened to them on August 5, 2019.
yeah. Interesting. Sushant, there are two schools of thought in India about Pakistan. One school of thought is that a stable, peaceful Pakistan is in the interest of India. It should stay, we should help it stay calm, we should help it stay peaceful, we should help it, pay its bills or whatever. But a stable Pakistan is good for India because who wants this headache? Who wants the headache? Because an unstable Pakistan is a bigger problem. There is another school of thought which says that, listen, it's not a stable Pakistan is not possible. It's impossible to we can't tell these guys anything. So it is good that this country breaks into whatever pieces, and that might be a better outcome for Pakistan, because Pakistan as a state, as a geopolitical experiment, because that is what it is. I don't even call it a state, it's a geopolitical experiment which was done. So if that geopolitical experiment fails, let it fail, because it was never meant to be viable. It is something that British had forced on us anyway. Let it go into, I mean, it was broken into two halves anyway. Let the Baloch go their way. Let Pakhtuns do what they want. And that might be a better outcome for India. While it's impossible to sort of have a crystal gazing ball, what is your personal opinion? What do you think? I don't care about Pakistan as much, but what do you think is an outcome of Pakistan that would be good for India?
So, Sunanda, I, there is a bit of a conflict in my mind on this issue. On some things, I'm very clear. Uh, what I'm very clear is that in a perfect world, I would go with the first line of argument. But we don't live in a perfect world.
स्टेबल हो, अपने घर में रहो, हमें कुछ मत बोलो, ऐसा.
हाँ, मतलब कि ठीक है, हम नहीं, अगर perfect world में तो वो हमारी दोस्ती यारी भी होती, we would have been normal, civilized behavior with each other. We've tried it for 75 years. They've been relatively stable for 75 years. They've been relatively strong and prosperous also for 75 years.
Initially, at least, in the first 20 years, they were more prosperous than us, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how has it turned out for us? The people who say this should first ask themselves, how well has it turned out for us? Number one. Number two, even if I wanted that to happen, it is beyond my capacity and my capability to make that happen. I can't save the Pakistanis from themselves.
Yeah,
right?
right.
So why should I even try to do that?
Yeah.
On the other side, the argument is that, look, when a country collapses, it's not a neat surgical collapse, right? It's very bloody messy, very messy. Everybody does not collapse like the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah.
You also collapse like Somalia collapsed. You'll also collapse like some of the other failed states.
Yeah.
And a country of 230, 240, maybe 250, all million people right on your doorstep collapsing. You can't escape the fallout of that, but you can't even prevent it. So my own sense is that we should brace ourselves for that eventuality. I'm not saying it's happening immediately, but it's an eventuality which we cannot entirely rule out. So I think what we need to do is we need to brace ourselves for such an event, and figure out how best can we insulate ourselves to the extent that is possible from the fallout of such an event, and prepare, at least on paper, various plans. Have build up your capabilities, build up your structures to be able to control the fallout. Ultimately, it will be everybody's problem, not just ours. But at least initially, it will be ours.
Because they're right there. We
Yeah,
cannot
because
wish
they're right
away
there.
our location. Yeah.
Exactly. And if anybody thinks that, that piddly little fence that we have, that's good for 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, right? That's not good if 100,000, 500,000, a million people are wanting to escape and come into and find some kind of sanctuary,
Yeah.
in a relatively stable place. Your fence cannot hold that.
No.
Okay. So you need to figure that out. And the way things are heading, I don't rule out any eventuality. I'm not saying that it'll happen tomorrow. I'm not saying it'll happen 2 years from now, maybe not even 5 years from now. Maybe it could happen a week from now.
Yeah.
It's all up in the air right now.
Yeah. We don't know
The
with the
kind of
way they,
instability, which is there,
yeah.
and everything which can go wrong is going wrong.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is, and I've said this earlier and I'll say it again, the worst thing to my mind is nobody has any idea how to fix or how to, stabilize Pakistan in Pakistan.
Yeah.
How to how to
Sushant,
take care of the economy, how to take care of the politics, how to address the issue of radicalism and terrorism, how to manage the civil military relations. Nobody has the foggiest idea.
yeah. Sushant, you have covered and studied Pakistan for so long. They were at their lowest in 1971, when Bangladesh was created after the war. And do you think this is the lowest for them right now, even worse than that?
Yes, because back then they had they had friends, they had patrons.
Mm,
They screwed up, but they still had friends, they had patrons. Number two, their economy was not as bad as it is today.
no.
Their administration and their army was not in the same situation that it finds itself today.
Mm,
So, comparing what happened in 71 with what's happening more than 50 years later, their past are two different countries. Also, remember that 71, you can say that it was split into two.
mm.
It was already split into two,
Um, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it was not as though, Sindh was
Taken
torn
away.
apart. And
Yeah, or Punjab went away or something like
so,
that.
yeah, it was Ram Pakistan, but
Mm,
it was what was, in at least people who live in Pakistan. For them, that was Pakistan. Bangladesh was a colony.
yeah.
These, and the Pakistanis would, the Punjabi at least, racist Punjabi that he would describe as these short, black, ugly fellows, who
Bengali
have to
speaking
serve
fellows.
us.
Mm.
Yeah, and when the Bengali rose up in revolt, he kicked the Punjabi backside like nobody else has, right? Of course, with some help from us. But but the fact of the matter remains that it was a relatively a surgical kind of a separation.
Mm,
This time around, it's not going to be that. The
mm,
politics is totally screwed up now.
mm,
So I think making those comparisons I don't think that's the right thing to do, and I think in many ways the situation is much worse today than what it was back then.
yeah. And before I go to audience questions, I want to ask you one last question. If Pakistan was forced into a war today with India, forced into a war with India, will it win anything? Or will we go right up to Lahore? This time to Jayengi Lahore.
Yeah, देखो, but why? Who would force them into a war? I don't think there is any incentive for
No,
the
because there is
Indians to.
so much instability in Pakistan, and Fauj decides there is nothing else to do right now. The only way to get our troops and our people to stand behind us is a war with India. Because what else can they do? So if
So I don't think they would go to the extent of wanting a war, because you don't fight a war when you said $3.6 billion. It's
mm,
actually $3.1 billion.
okay, it was 3 January 20th. So up tak to ho gaya hoga, yeah,
ठीक है? So you don't fight a war with an empty treasury.
yeah.
Uh, what is the reason why everybody is clamoring? And if you fight a war, then you know uh, it is written. It I think it's a no-brainer that you're screwed like nothing else.
Mm,
Not just because militarily, economically, and otherwise, you're finished.
mm,
You're completely, especially if you've instigated it,
yeah.
because there's very little patience with you even right now in the
Mm,
world. Nobody. See, they went to the Americans, they've not got anything from them. They went to the Saudis, they gave nothing. They went to the Emiratis, nothing. The Qataris said, अच्छा वो दोनों plants दे दो, उसके बाद बात करेंगे. The Chinese said, इतना दे दिया, उसी में खुश रहो, और नहीं अभी कुछ आ रहा. Right? Um, the IMF said, you have always shortchanged us. You've always made assurances and never delivered. First you deliver, then we do. Okay. Even if the IMF was to give them some money, it's going to probably tide them over for a couple of months and they're back to square one. Uh, their fiscal and let me repeat this. I've said this earlier. Uh, my own calculation is, and I might be a little here and there, but if I'm going by the data which they've given in their budget, which they presented last year, of what is the revenue estimates of the federal government and what is the kind of debt servicing they will incur by the end of the year, the entire revenue of the federal government, which means tax and non tax revenue, is going to go off in paying in debt servicing. So everything in Pakistan is running on debt. You fight a war, you instigate a war. If you think that will unite your people are actually going to throw shit on your head because they'll say, "Ki, yaar, we are already caught up in this mess and you buggers are initiating a war."
Yeah.
So try and listen to a lot of the conversations which are happening. For example, which is a very good media, not a perfect media, but the social media, for example, does give you an insight into how people are thinking and what people
Yeah.
are talking about. There is so much clamor today. Ki, yaar, forget about Kashmir. Let's talk to India. Yaar. Okay, you keep Kashmir on the back burner, but we need to engage India now. We need to do business with India.
Mm.
You know, uh,
Agree.
and the army needs to back off. If in such an environment you initiate a war, and wars are very uncertain, right?
Mm.
So India, I don't think any has any incentive. You know, you are trotting along at 6%, 7% growth. Why would you want to? Why would you want to disturb that by
Yeah.
fighting a war? For what?
Mm.
Right? Uh, the Pakistanis can't afford it.
Mm.
So I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. So we rule out the possibility of the war just because mostly
Skirmish
skirmish. Yeah.
maybe, but I don't think
Full-fledged
anything
war,
major.
no. A
Even
full-fledged war.
skirmish, I would imagine that they would say that, yeah, if there's peace and quiet, because look, if for example now you start uh, the ceasefire goes, for example, uh, look at the kind of expense which is incurred if you are engaging in this cross border shelling.
Yeah.
Can you afford it on an empty treasury?
Yeah.
You can't, so I think economics is going to
Yeah,
prevent it.
overrule that. So we'll see just these Ikaduka terrorists crossing the international border or LOC, and that may
Yeah.
continue, but nothing beyond that is what you're saying. I'll go to audience questions now. And there's one question that says, can China use the economic crisis of Pakistan for its geopolitics vis-a-vis India?
Can you just repeat that?
Can China use the economic crisis of Pakistan, as in, can China take over Pakistan or something, and then sort of build some leverage against India? Or,
Why would anybody want to take over Pakistan, यार?
yeah.
कोई पागल ही होगा जो करेगा ये
China
काम.
तो पक्का ही नहीं है पागल. China will not
Look,
do it.
the Chinese might not might be inclined to say that, okay, let's do a Hamman Tota in Gwadar,
Yeah.
right? That, okay, you have to give us so much money. Why don't you sign a long lease with us on the Gwadar
Mm.
port,
Yeah.
or the Ormara port, or the Pasni port, whichever, that we'll build some kind of a trading base out here, which will link up to CPEC. So, वो भी उनको टोपी पहनाएंगे कि okay, fine, let's do this. The kind of uh, dissemble that Pakistan uses, the others can also use it, like the Taliban are showing to them right now. But the Chinese have given them tons of money, and the Chinese know that they're going to lose all of it.
Mm.
Number one. Number two, the Chinese will probably help them some. But I think the Chinese have understood that, that whole thing, that CPEC will become this great economic
Mm.
uh, thing
Will
which
not
will
happen.
bind us together even stronger. The economic viability of the CPEC was always questionable.
Mm.
It simply did not make any sense. But the Chinese had to sink in money. They've sunk that money, and now they're not going to get any returns because, just like in the case of Sri Lanka, it will happen in the case of Pakistan that the West, for example, will certainly insist Okay, first you get a write off on your Chinese debts before you look for anything else.
mm,
And the Chinese don't want to do that because that sets a very bad precedent. So I'm a little skeptical. Yes, I can understand the Chinese wanting some, slivers of territory, but beyond that, what will they use Pakistan for? Yeah, I
yeah,
think सबको औकात पता लग गई है पाकिस्तान की.
yeah. Plus, with such radicalized population, it is, and Pakistan, I mean, China is for sure is not going to do that. There is a lot of talk on a certain camp in India that often talks about POJK. So the question is, do the chances to reclaim the POJK increase given the economic downfall in Pakistan? Also, given the fact that people living in POJK would incline more towards reintegrating with India because it's not like rest of Pakistan, but just in POJK. Although I'm not sure. Do you think people in POJK would incline towards reintegrating with India?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No, I don't think so. I think it is one thing to maintain your claim over that,
Mm,
and if the opportunity offers itself to incorporate it back into the Indian Union,
mm,
but to go, but my own sense is it's a little premature. I think let them die a little bit more of hunger and thirst and everything else. Let them not have any job opportunities. And if we can raise our game from a 3 trillion economy to a 10, 12, 15 trillion economy, then I think that pull and pressure, which is not there right now. I
yeah.
think people who talk about it probably don't know their front side from their back. The
Mm,
kind of hostility which is there, because one thing the Pakistanis have been extremely successful in selling is their propaganda,
mm,
and they've been extremely successful in indoctrinating their people,
mm,
especially people in POJK.
mm,
And when I say POJK, I'm even talking about POGB, right?
mm,
Um, and I have happened to travel in Gilgit, for example, many years back. And something which somebody said to me was, has always stuck in my mind. This guy who's a local level politician, small timer, journalist, also nice guy,
mm,
very friendly. First Hindu he had met in his life was, on that visit. Uh, and he said something which has always struck with me. He said, the Pakistanis have treated us very shabbily. They've
mm,
treated us like dirt. But what to do? At the end of the day, they are Muslims
mm,
and you guys are not.
yeah.
And if I have to pick a choice between joining a state which is a Muslim state and a non-Muslim state, I will any day join a Muslim state.
Mm.
Now, you have to, first win the battle in the minds of people before you win the battle on the ground.
And why would
Especially,
India be interested in it at the moment?
especially this kind of a war. You
Yeah.
first have to win it in the minds of the people.
Mm,
That they clamor to be incorporated with you.
yeah.
Don't go after those demonstrations which take place. Many times those demonstrations are basically to just finger the Pakistanis.
Okay.
कि अगर ये किया तो हम ये कर देंगे types.
Mm,
uh, I think you need to take that with a pinch of salt. I don't think you should fall for that stuff.
mm,
uh, yes, there are huge problems out there. Yes, there are many people who are very unhappy out there. But are they at this point in time ready to, become part of Mother India? I'm not so sure. Not at this point in time.
okay. And one last question is, can the economic crisis in Pakistan and overall weak Pakistan at the moment strengthen existing political conflicts in Balochistan and Sindh?
Of course they will.
Mm,
Of course they will. When the capacity of the state, and this is something that the Pakistanis in their stupidity never really understood.
mm,
They have always celebrated the fact that they had a huge black economy, because they said, uh, that means that people don't die of hunger. What these idiots never realized is that the bigger the black economy and the more it sucks out of the formal economy, the weaker the state becomes.
Mm.
Okay, so you might have somebody who's a billionaire, but he pays no bloody tax. So, of course, he's having a party, but your state is poorer for it and it's weaker for it.
Mm.
So, a state which is not able to collect taxes is a state which will never be a successful state.
Mm.
Now, the thing is, why I say this in the context of Balochistan and Sindh is that when a state is staring down a barrel, it's staring at an empty barrel of funds, its treasury is empty. It simply cannot cater to its people, especially the people who are already alienated and marginalized. So
Mm.
obviously, at that point of time, the sense of alienation and marginalization is only going to grow, and the angst against an occupationist state, or at least an occupationist province, because a lot of people say that it's Punjab occupied Pakistan. Those sentiments only explode.
Yeah.
So yes, the bigger the economic crisis, I would imagine it will spill over into strengthening many of the fisiparious tendencies which already exist in Pakistan.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to end this on a lighter note and ask you that who has the access to that red button, the nuclear button? Do we still know in Pakistan? But I'm going to ask you a more serious question and
No,
end it
but
with
it's you are assuming it's a red button.
that.
Pakistan is an Islamic state. It's a green button.
Green button. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I take that back. It must be a green button. I want to ask you this and probably end it on this. Do you worry about this? Is a strange country. They cannot run an electricity grid. They don't have money to run an electricity grid, but they are an economic, I mean, they are a nuclear power. So, do you worry about them because they've done it in the past with North Korea? Do you, because they will not be able to use the bomb? I don't think, I personally think they will never be able to use a bomb if they have one. And do you think, at least if they have the nuclear capability, they are going to, do this, what they did with North Korea, give their, the dirty bomb situation and pass on their nuclear capability or pass on their nuclear expertise to rogue nations around the world? Do you think in 2023 that is a possibility?
Yeah, dekho, again, I think don't compare North Korea with Pakistan
Mm.
for a very simple reason that North Korea has always been isolated, has nothing to do with the rest of the world, virtually nothing. Um, its biggest links are with China to some extent, Russia, even that is very controlled. Um, so don't compare North Korea with a country like Pakistan, where the elite have relatives in the West, want to travel to the West for their holidays, even if the country is bankrupt. Uh,
And most
they
people have dual citizenships with Britain, don't they? I was surprised.
yeah, many
Even
of their
people who are in
senior
power
bureaucrats,
have two passports.
many of their bureaucrats have it.
Mm.
Uh, Having a house in Dubai or in Europe or in Australia or something else is a necessary thing. It's a status symbol almost. Uh, if they were to indulge in the kind of activity, restart the nuclear Walmart,
Mm.
which they were trying at one point of time, uh, you think the rest of the world is just going to sit by and watch them do it, especially given the condition in which they are?
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think the North Koreans import dog food from outside, right? The Pakistanis even import dog food from outside. तो जब इनकी औकात ही ये है यार, तो you think they have, the, as somebody calls it, the testicular fortitude to do this kind of thing? If they were to try it, they would be held to pay. I don't think the rest of the world is just going to sit by and watch them do it. And the Pakistanis know it themselves.
Yeah.
So I don't think that is going to happen. Secondly, I think, Sunanda, very often we forget that just because you are a nuclear weapon state uh, means nothing.
Mm.
The Soviet Union, with all the technology, which all the science and everything which they had, they could not put vegetables on a shelf in a supermarket.
Yeah.
That is the reason they
Finally,
failed,
that's what collapsed them. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is the reason they failed.
People
They
don't eat bombs for dinner. People cannot eat bombs for dinner.
exactly, right? You can't provide them with clothes, you can't provide them with anything,
Yeah.
and the state collapses.
Yeah.
Uh, and we've seen a nuclear weapon state collapse.
Yeah.
So if another one does, I don't think it is something which is completely
Unprecedented.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. On that note, we have decided on this show that there is going to be no war, just skirmishes. Between Sushant and I, we've decided all that. That there are going to be no wars, there will be skirmishes, and they will not engage in any nuclear proliferation. But out of this serious conversation have come out many important conversations that we hope to have in next few podcasts. We are going to keep talking about Pakistan, and I hope to invite Sushant once again because a lot of things are going to keep happening, and we hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. Thank you so much for joining us on Epicenter. Thank you. Thank you, my audience, for being with me and for sending all your questions and for watching us. One thing that I would request all of you to do right now is please subscribe to Epilogue News Network on YouTube, because that is the way you will get information about our new guests, about our new show. So first thing you need to do is subscribe and follow Epilogue News Network on all their social media handles: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I am on Twitter. You can reach out to me anytime for any questions, and we are going to have conversations like this in the future as well. Keep reading, keep discussing, and be well. Thank you. This is Sunanda Vashisht signing off.